Good evening. My name is Randy Hollerith. I'm the Dean of the Washington National Cathedral. And on behalf of all of us here, it's such an honor and a pleasure to welcome you this evening. Imam, thank you for that. That was a beautiful way to start tonight's proceedings. It is a pleasure for us whenever we can host our brothers and sisters from other faith traditions here in this house of prayer for all people, when we can come together in peace and understanding with the purpose of deepening that peace and understanding and of drawing closer as brothers and sisters, and to build community with one another is a beautiful thing. So thank you for being here tonight and for taking part in these conversations. They are so important, especially at a time in our nation when it feels like so many people are not talking to one another in ways that they should be. So these conversations take on even a greater sense of importance. As we begin tonight, each of us are going to come up and do, four of us are going to come up and do a little 2-minute welcome. And part of what we're going to try to do is to share a minute of a personal reflection about how interfaith relationships and moments can be transcended and transformational. For 16 years, I was rector of an Episcopal church in Richmond, Virginia, St. James's Episcopal Church. And one summer afternoon, in the middle of a thunderstorm, lightning struck a transformer in the alley behind the church and blew up the transformer. And the sparks traveled from the transformer to the roof of the church and completely destroyed our sanctuary. The church sat about 1,000 people, and the fire consumed the roof and the interior. As we stood on the street watching the fire spread, the rabbi from Beth Ahaba, the Reformed synagogue next door, walked up to the then priest in charge of St. James's, it was not me then, and he said very simply, "We will take the synagogue on Friday night. You may have it on Sunday morning." One simple sentence of invitation and of welcome. And when you consider the history of Christians persecuting Jews throughout the centuries, the hospitality and the welcome for that congregation to open their sacred space for Christians to hold their worship was an immense gift. For more than 2 years, our congregation worshiped at Beth Ahaba in their space, Sunday after Sunday, while our church was being rebuilt, and in many ways they saved our congregation. As a result of that experience, an indelible bond was formed between the two of us. And every year the congregations hold interfaith workshops and conversations, and sometimes trialogues with our Muslim brothers and sisters. We also blessedly were able to build a parking deck together so that the synagogue and the church share a 3-story parking deck that works beautifully unless the high holy days and some of the other holidays get too close together, and then we have to figure it out. But that interfaith relationship with Congregation Beth Ahaba is one of the most special relationships of my ministry, and I treasure my friendship with Rabbi Byfield and with that congregation. So what I wish for all of us is that we too may have deep and abiding relationships and know the love and grace and hospitality that can come when we open ourselves to one another. Thank you.
Dear friends and potential friends, and isn't that what it's all about? Our ability to see potential in others, in every single being. Our potential to be friends, to be soulmates, to be wanderers on the path to enlightenment. Whether you ask an anthropologist or a mystic, the want and need for people to be with others is hardwired into our genes and into our spirit. The Quran reminds us with these words, "We have made you nations and tribes that you may know one another. Lo, the noblest of you in the sight of the Almighty is the best in conduct." And as we know the other, be they stranger, traveler, or immigrant, we discover not only the humanity in them, but we travel into the depth of our own souls and find our true selves. Rumi suggests, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Good evening.
My name is Aaron Miller, and I'm one of the rabbis at Washington Hebrew Congregation. And growing up as a Jew in Birmingham, Alabama, every day of your life is an interfaith experience. And I want to tell you, had it not been for the interfaith experiences of my childhood, I wouldn't be standing here today. There is something profound that happens in high schools throughout the South. And one of the questions that I have been asked outside of the South all the time is, what was it like to grow up as a Jew? How many Jews could there possibly be in Birmingham, Alabama? The answer is very few, and fewer than you think. But I want to tell you something about growing up in the South, something about growing up surrounded by people of faith, Jewish or otherwise, shaped who how and what I've become as a Jewish adult today. There's something that happens in Jewish high schools, in secular high schools throughout the South, where people, at least my group of friends, became religious as children, became religious as 15, 16 years old, became born again in ways that you don't really find in other places. And as my friends and as my community became religious in their own way, it turned on as part of my Jewish identity that I didn't know existed. And so together with my Christian friends, with my Southern Baptist compatriots, we explored our religions together. We became religious people together. And I do want to let you in on a little bit of Miller family history. Looking at my family lineage, it was as though I had no choice but to become a rabbi. My grandfather of blessed memory was a rabbi. My father is a rabbi. Until the age of 14 years old, it was the last thing I ever wanted to do, but something about that transformative moment of discovering religion with religious people in Birmingham, Alabama, changed my life forever. And so, as we welcome the stranger, I hope and pray and know, looking out at this diverse crowd, that we see the divinity in those searching for divinity, that we discover God in those who are able to see God in one another, and that through this sacred search of God, through the eyes of our brothers and sisters sharing in a religious journey together, I pray that hand in hand we walk closer towards a more holy world. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya Bani Adam. Ya Bani Adam. Laqad karamna Bani Adam. This is what God calls us in the Quran. Children of Adam. Say we are all children of Adam. And he said he's made all of the children of Adam with dignity and honor. And from Adam, we know when he was created, he didn't have a racial identity, he didn't have an ethnic identity, and he didn't have a national identity. So we have to continue to look at the first identity he was given was the human identity. And all of us come from Adam. And from Adam came all of these wonderful, beautiful, diverse expressions that we see in this room, all from the human family of Adam. I'm Imam Talib Sharif, president of the Interfaith Conference. We have 11 member organizations, they're various faiths, been in existence since 1978. In fact, Masjid Muhammad, I'm the president of the nation's mosque, Masjid Muhammad right here in D.C., an 80-year community, and they were members from the very beginning. So we've always been enjoying this interfaith relationship. So let me very quickly give you just one verse from the Quran, and I want you to listen to this one verse, that everything in the verse, think about everything being equal in this one verse, and then I want to give a quick story, and then I'll end with a prayer on behalf of the whole group of leaders just came up. So I'm going to say it in English for the sake of time. This is in chapter 4, verse 36. Serve Almighty God and associate naught with him. Be kind, be good to parents, relatives, orphans, the needy or destitute, your near and distant or alien neighbor, who be of kin or stranger, the companion at your side, the traveler. To your servants, surely God loves not the proud and boastful. The story I want to share with you very briefly, this was last year. I was leading a delegation in Turkey during the time that our mosque was threatened by a white supremacist group. They had targeted about 27 mosques across America, and they do armed protests and they agitate the congregational members. And so our congregation was targeted in D.C., and I received the information, and my congregation was asking me how to handle the situation since I was away. And because of the relationships that we built over the years, we began to hear, because it was publicized in the area via the news, the many faith organizations that we have kinship with. They were calling to say that they would come, they would stand, they would be there with us. And I decided to thank them and appreciated them expressing that, but I didn't want them to come because the media had gotten set up, and that would mean that we would have to speak to the organization that wanted to protest against us and highlight them. So I asked them if they would just stand down, they could come and join us for that day's prayer, but I didn't want to do anything really different, but for our congregation to be vigilant. But what happened was this. The neighbors came out. We found out that 40 families of neighbors had gotten together, and they put together a flyer, and they posted it all over the neighborhood on the trees and on the telegram poles, the light poles, etc., and it said this: "This is a hate-free zone. We stand with our neighbor, Masjid Muhammad." Isn't that wonderful? You can imagine how I felt on an interfaith delegation in Turkey. And then I found out this. Among those neighbors were Christians and Jews. And they protected us. And they had went as far as to tell the Washington Post this, that had that group did come, and my team, my security team said that 2 carloads of individuals fitting their description in military uniforms, they didn't see any weapons, of course, came by, and I guess they saw the signs and they kept moving. But the neighbors said this: had they gotten out of their vehicles and had they decided to target us, that they were going to form a human chain between us and them, and we had to do nothing. This is how we should respond to each other. This is the neighborly speech. So we thank Almighty God for that. I'll conclude with this. This is a welcoming prayer on behalf of all those who just came before me and myself. Very short. And they're coming with us. Good. So they'll be with us together. This is from all of us. Very brief welcome. And it goes like this. A prayer for welcome. Peace be to this house and to all who dwell in it. The call to welcome the stranger may come from a shout or a greeting or a quiet knock. We know that indifference or fear of the new may make us spiritually deaf. We know also that we are living in a special period of God's saving action, a time when a new route is being carved out. May we, among many in our countries, and these times, hear the call and open the doors of our lives. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
My name is Kelly Brown Douglas, and I am the canon theologian here at the Washington National Cathedral. I add my voice in welcome, and I have been asked this evening if I could give us some kind of understanding of why we're here and what it means for us to be here and why we are compelled as various communities of faith to indeed be in this place and to welcome the stranger. In the book of Leviticus from Hebrew Scripture, we hear these words: "The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt." From the Hindu tradition, we hear this: "This person is my relative, and that person is a stranger, says the small-minded one. For the one who knows the truth, the whole world is a family." We hear this from the teachings of Buddhism. How does a person rain down everywhere? He gives to all, be they recluses and Brahmins or wretched, needy beggars. The Islamic faith tradition tells us this, that be kind to parents and near the kinsmen, and to orphans and to the needy, and to the neighbor who is of kin, and to the neighbor who is a stranger, and to the companion at your side, and to the traveler and to slaves that your right hands own. And from the Sikh tradition, we hear none is our enemy, none is our stranger. And from the Christian tradition, Matthew reports Jesus is saying, "I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me." It would no doubt be very difficult to find a religious tradition that does not have as a central principle the call to provide hospitality that is welcome to the stranger. We are all called to welcome someone outside of our various communities. Why? Just because he, she, or they are a stranger. To welcome those who are different from us is a part of our shared lives together. Moreover, it is indeed in our welcoming others into our communities, that is, welcoming the ones who may be strangers to us, that we are reminded of the diversity of God's human creation. And so it is that in this way, there is no one that is a stranger to God. And so as no one is a stranger to God, neither should they be to us. In this regard, we are all a part of God's family. We are all in our uniqueness, family, one to another. And so there truly are no strangers amongst us, inasmuch as we are all children of God. Yet, even as our various religious traditions, each in their own way, affirm who we are one to another, as each of us is called to welcome the stranger, we know as we sit here that we all fall short of the mark. To heed the call to welcome the stranger has not been easy. Indeed, we find in the Christian tradition that it perhaps was not even easy for Jesus, as the stranger that was the Syrophoenician woman had to remind him that even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the table. And so here we are tonight, reflecting upon this call that we all share to welcome the stranger. Tonight, therefore, is really about more than simply affirming the call. Instead, is about facing the challenge of living in to the call. And so as we are gathered here tonight, as we are here in our circles for dialogue, let us listen and let us learn from one another about, yes, what it means at one time or the other in all of our lives to be a stranger, and what it means as well to live into the challenge of welcoming the stranger, even as we confess how we have fallen short of that welcoming call. And so, let us all be committed on this evening to grow in our understanding of precisely what we are called to do, as we are indeed called to welcome the stranger who has happened to arrive amongst us. And so now I invite you all into hearing 3 stories from those who will tell us what it means to welcome or be a stranger. Yes.
Okay, so I'll start off. Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you all. My name is Mikhail Martinez Jaka. I'm a Boy Scout in Troop 163 in Purcellville, Virginia, and as well as a member of the Adams Center, the All-Delaware Muslim Society in Sterling. I'm here to tell a story about how I was welcomed in a mainly Christian troop. I've been a Boy Scout since 2012. I was a Cub Scout about 10 years before that, and when I was Cub Scout, I was in a Muslim pack at the Adams Center. Later, I crossed over into the Muslim troop at the Adams Center. But a few years after, we decided to move to a troop a little closer to where we live, since the Adams Center is about 40 minutes drive. So we moved to a troop about 10 minutes away from where we live, and coincidentally, it was at the St. Andrew Presbyterian Church in Purcellville, which is already partnered with the Adams Center in Interfaith work. When my older brother and I first joined the troop, it was winter of 2013, and it was a mainly Christian troop, and we were the first Muslims there. There were already 2 Hindus and several Jews in the troop, but it was still mainly Christian. It was a troop about 30 scouts consistently coming, and they welcomed us like any other scouts that joined the troop. A little while later at a campout, we were doing one of our daily prayers in between activities, and one of the scouts came up, and once we were done, asked us what we were doing. We explained to them it was one of our daily prayers that we do 5 times a day. And they were genuinely interested, and they asked questions about our holy month of Ramadan, during which we fast, as well as other Islamic holidays. A couple years later, my little brother Israfil joined the troop as well, which now did about like 30% more Muslims in the troop. And things continue normally. We've participated in most of the troop's activities. My little brother is the scribe of the troop, so he has a leadership position there. And it was a very welcoming troop. The adults, the other scouts, it was a very good experience, definitely. And so it's been about 4 years since we first joined the troop. A year ago, one of the Hindu scouts became SPL of the troop. So he led us all in campouts and activities, and he was like one of the best SPLs ever. Everyone was friends with him, so yeah. And about 6 months later, when we held our semi-annual elections, my older brother became SPL of the troop. And it's a great experience. There wasn't a big deal. It was normal for everyone. Jabril, my older brother, being SPL, Muslim being SPL. It was, every day for us, every day for them as well. Scouting in America is very welcoming. It has religious emblems for almost every Christian denomination, every faith. There's Islamic religious emblem award. If you see this purple knot right here, that's the one I got. It's the Bismillah emblem in the name of God. That's the award. So it's just a great program. And in the troop, it was very welcoming, and it was awesome. And we just participate in events. We go to summer camp, a whole week-long camping trip, and there we all are. Hindu scouts, Jewish scouts, Muslim scouts, Christian scouts, trying to figure out how to fold the American flag because we all forgot. Tying knots to build structures like 10 feet tall. It's just riding ATVs along muddy trails, It's a great experience overall, and the church, and as well as the troop, was very welcoming. And that's my story of how my brothers and I were welcomed in our troop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am Reverend Lisa Dunson, and I, like Rabbi Miller, grew up in the South. And so I'm going to tell you a quick story about some church people. So grab your seats, any church people that you know. I grew up in a Black Baptist church, and needless to say that anything or anyone that was not of the mainstream was not welcomed. Well, I was not of the mainstream because I am a same-gender loving person. This is not acceptable even today in many of the churches in the South. So I ended up leaving the church when I was about 14 years old. I moved from Kentucky to the DC area, and I remained outside of the church because I could not find the church that would allow me to bring my whole self into the sanctuary. Now, during this time, I also had a great desire to get to know God and who God was. And so to try to reconcile the fact that I couldn't go to church and not be beat up, yet there was this God figure that I was so intensely trying to get to know, I ended up traveling a path of addiction. And so crack cocaine became my drug of choice, and my money became the crack's drug of choice. And, you know, as I was going through that space, I often would ask, God, I would ask this being that was up above, why am I here? What is it? Why am I here? Nothing in my background would have indicated that I would have wound up where I was. And one day, one of the managers at my office, she invited me to attend a service at Covenant Baptist United Church in it was just Covenant Baptist Church at the time in Southeast DC. And quite honestly, I thought, if I go up in this church and these walls come down on these people, it ain't gonna be my fault, because she invited me. I did not know what to expect. I was welcomed so extravagantly. I don't even know how to explain how it felt to be welcomed into a space that I was trying to find so much out about. I left. That did not end my addiction. I still did my little thing every now and then, but I continued to seek God. I continued to seek to learn and to understand why there was such a big difference in how one group of Christians treated folk and how another group could treat them. About a year later, I ended up joining Covenant. It was New Year's Eve, and I was on my way to Crossroads out in Bladensburg. It's a little reggae joint. I was on my way there, and I heard something say, get up and go to Covenant. And so I got up and I went to Covenant. And I was quite upset. I was actually really angry at this voice, because I changed. I had my little club clothes on. I was going to go get my little reggae thing on. I was like, I ain't trying to go up in nobody's church. I went to church. I joined Covenant that night. I was introduced to one of the ministers there who helped me connect with an NA group. I began the path to recovery. I am not ashamed to say it didn't make it the first time. I ain't ashamed to say I didn't make it the second time either. Third time was the charm. But what happened, thank you. One Wednesday night, part of my hook and part of the thing that helped me stay clean and stay in recovery was the fact that Covenant had Bible study on Wednesday nights. So, I went to church on Sunday, hit that thing on Wednesday night, I'm back on Sunday, and I was good. Well, I showed up on Wednesday night and the doors were locked. And I'm gonna be quite honest, I was pissed, because I knew what that meant for me as a recovering addict, for the doors of the church to be closed and no one be there. And so the next morning, I called the church and I spoke to one of the ministers there, and I said, I was there last night for Bible study. I said, nobody else was there. What's going on? And she said, well, we take a break. We take a break during the summer, vacation. And I said, well, how the hell would you like it if God took a break on you? What if God decided to go on vacation on us? And so Pastor Christine Wiley, I talked to her because I was extremely upset. And she said to me, Lisa, she goes, if we need to have the doors of this church open on Wednesday nights, then that's what we'll do. And we have had Bible study from that Wednesday, 11 years ago, to this very day. I am the Minister of Christian Education at Covenant. I am a same-gender loving woman who can bring my entire self, my authentic self, who I am, into that church and not have to worry about who is or is not going to accept who I am. When you talk about extravagant welcomes, you have to look beyond the isms and the phobias that we so often find in our intimate dialogues with one another. And it's not an easy place to be for any of us. It's not an easy place to be the stranger, and it's not so much an easy place sometimes to be the one who welcomes the stranger. But if we do not put away the things that divide us, if covenant had not been such a welcoming place and willing to accept me in my total brokenness, I would not be standing here before you today as an ordained clergy, as one who has been clean and sober for over 11 years, and one who loves everybody. I don't care how you look, I don't care how you smell, I don't care what you do, who you love, how you live. I love everyone, and I welcome everyone because I was that stranger.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gigi Alford, and I'm a member of the Baha'i community in Bethesda, Maryland. I also have a story to share with all of you from the South, so I see we have a theme tonight. I want to tell you the story of my sister's wedding. My sisters and I grew up in Alabama. Our father was from there, so we could blend in pretty well, fool people into thinking we belonged, until they met my mom. She was Iranian. And until they found out our religion, Baha'i, they'd never heard of that. But my father and his 3 brothers had grown up in the Methodist Church, and every single one of them had embraced a different tradition. One became a Baptist, one became a Presbyterian, one became an Episcopalian priest, and then my father became a Baha'i. So there was a little bit of latitude for that, and we were welcomed pretty well. So that's probably what gave my sister the courage to find a partner who came from the Pentecostal church. And 5 years ago, I went to their marriage ceremony, and it was beautiful. It was intimate, and we had a joint ceremony. The priest, the pastor who had helped Nathan all through his growing up, gave the ceremony for the Pentecostal church, and then the rest of us pulled together and proceeded with the Baha'i ceremony, and it really felt like strangers embracing each other in that space. Fast forward 5 years, my sister and her husband now have a baby boy. He's 8 months old, and my sister likes to remind people quite often that this child, especially in our current climate, has aunts and uncles who fled their homeland because of religious persecution and were welcomed in this country, and that he carries that heritage. And he's really blended these families that some of them may have come over as newcomers to this land many more generations ago. And this little child, 8 months old, has instantly transformed people who are staring at each other across generations as, first as foreigners, but now as welcomed loved ones. And just to quickly finish, my brother-in-law is a deep and wise individual, and we often have long philosophical conversations. And just last month, when we were celebrating the Baha'i season of Ayami Ha, the days of gift giving, we were talking about how the cells in your body actually change every 7 years. And We were sitting around the kitchen talking about this, and I said, well, don't you know that your taste buds change every 7 years? That's why maybe you had something you didn't like before, but you try it as an adult, and all of a sudden you think, wow, this doesn't taste as bad as it did when I was a child. And he stopped and thought for a while and just said, you know, I think better proof of that is that, you know, somebody born in rural Georgia could sit around this kitchen with all of you and feel so welcomed and loved.
Thank you each for those very powerful stories which provide for us both challenge and call. And so now we are indeed called in our circles of dialogue to indeed share our own stories. We would ask that as your dialogue leaders will guide you through this process, and the sort of guidelines for this are on page 2 of your bulletin of your program. There are those who have not been able to get into a circle, and so we ask those of you who are in the back to join us in dialogue as you form your own circle, or turn to your neighbor and begin as well to share your stories when you were welcomed as a stranger or when you felt unwelcomed, and what that was like for you. I will ask all of you to listen for the music to the welcome table, and we will invite you back into singing, and that will also signal to us the end of our first dialogue circle. Let us begin. Thank you. As we transition even from our first dialogue into our second small group dialogues, we will receive and listen in on a panel discussion that we are honored to have lead us in that discussion, Maureen Fiedler, who is, of course, as we all know and have probably heard her as the moderator and leader of WAMU's Interfaith Voices. She has also been an active participant for many years, for over 3 decades, in interfaith work, including coalitions working for social justice, racial justice, gender equality, LGBTQ rights, and peace. In her earlier years, she was an activist for the Equal Rights Amendment and one of 8 women to fast for 37 days in 1982 in Springfield, Illinois, for the ERA. She is a sister of Loretto and holds a doctorate in government from Georgetown University. And her special interests lie at the intersection of theology and public policy. I will turn our discussion over to her, and she will introduce you to our other 2 panelists.
Okay. Thank you so much, and thanks to everybody who's here tonight for these wonderful and enlightening discussions and stories. Before I introduce our panelists, I'm going to make a little bit of a plug for the show, if I could. The show that was produced for last Sunday, but it's still online, and you can listen online, is on what topic? Welcoming the stranger. And you can hear the stories of this Syrian refugee family, Muslims, father, mother, children, being welcomed by a couple that is Jewish and Unitarian. And you can hear a wonderful discussion of the sanctuary movement, which so many houses of worship are discussing across this country. And it ends with an ancient story, well, not too ancient, 100 years ago, of a refugee from Armenia who was given sanctuary by an Arab sheikh whose descendants today are refugees in Europe. So it's what goes around comes around, so to speak. But we're going to have a brief panel discussion here, probably a little too brief, on welcoming the stranger and what experiences we've had in our lives with that. And with me is, and correct me if I pronounce your name incorrectly, Dr. Siva Subramanian.
You got it.
Got it, okay, how about that? And he's a professor of pediatrics at Georgetown University Hospital, and more to the point for this audience, he is on the board of the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington. He's chairman of the Sri Siva Vishnu Temple in Lanham, Maryland, and co-founded the Council of Hindu Temples of the USA. He's got quite the credentials. And Hema Kaur Sidhu, am I right with that? Okay. She is a member of the Guru Nanak Foundation of America. That's a Sikh Gurdwara in Silver Spring, Maryland. She provides pastoral care as a disaster chaplain and is on the Faith Leader Response Team in Montgomery County, Maryland for disasters and other sorts of things. On the side, she's a neuroscientist, but you know, what can you do? So anyway, so I want to start out by asking each of you just to tell a story from your own life. When have you been welcomed when you felt like a stranger? Or when have you welcomed somebody else who came to you as a stranger? Any preference for who? Would you like to start?
Sure. First and foremost, I want to say namaste. What that means is the divinity in me salutes the divinity in you. So that is usually how we greet each other. And before we started, this discussion, when we talk about the stranger, because I wanted to make a point, because in Hinduism, which is actually called Sanatana Dharma, later on was to be called as Hinduism, has core beliefs: Brahman, the God; Atman, the soul or the spirit, is simply a spark of the divinity that is within you. And so this Brahman and Atman are one and the same. So that is why the spark of divinity in me and you, we salute each other, respect each other. And so the question of stranger doesn't come at all. And the second part of that in the scripture, what it says is Atithi Devo Bhava. What it means is Atithi is a guest. If you want to call that person as a stranger, you are welcome to it. But what it says is to be considered as God, because the divine spirit is within that guest as well. So from the Sanatana Dharma point of view or the Hinduism point of view, the stranger itself is a strange language. It is something, it is not there. Having said that, prefaced it, let me just give one example of here. After having been here for many years, we had an opportunity to welcome, in the language of what we speak, welcome a stranger or strangers. A few years ago, there was 60,000 refugees were brought into the United States and settled in various different cities from Bhutan. And these people who were evicted in the mid-80s from the southern part of the Bhutan, and they were settled by United Nations in the eastern part of Nepal as refugees. So they have been there in that camp for 20, 30 years. And before United Nations could settle among various countries, including India and many Western countries, to distribute at least 125,000 of those into the various countries. that was my first experience to being exposed to the refugees being settled in this area. And so when we had an opportunity to see them, it was very clear how difficult it is. So they have been plucked one day and brought here, and they are elders, young adults, children, women of various degrees of skills, language abilities, from nothing to something, and they are completely lost. And they are given about 8 months to about 11, 12 months of support, meager support by refugee relief. And the problem that they had on top of these things, and I can tell so many things, is about the faith. For them to be able to get was a problem. So there were two challenges. Because of the language issue, lack of skills, so there was no income, some of the elderly committed suicide. Oh my. And it was a tough thing for us to be able to not be able to give. I had a tough time getting, even as a physician, I had a tough time getting mental health services because the language was a problem, in terms of to them. And then the second was with children. The challenges were not all, but many of the children were bullied in the school because not all of them could speak the language, even though some of them could do much better than the elders, but it was a major issue. And then the third thing that happened was this was in Baltimore. 2 of the youngsters were shot dead on the streets. And so it was a major issue, and then we tried very hard to be able to bring them to health fairs, to health care, mental health, as well as in terms of to introduce them to the faith. And it was a major task, and I think we need to do a much better job. Mm-hmm. And another challenge that we had, we could not get the support from the state or the federal government to be able to help a lending hand to them. That will be given only to the 10 recognized other religious faith organizations. We couldn't get any. So there are challenges that we allowed to meet as well. So I'll stop there because there are so many things that happen about that as well. I want to give Hema an opportunity to talk about it.
Sat Sri Akal. I'm from a Sikh faith. Sat Sri Akal means truth will prevail. So the Sikh faith starts from true oneness, Creator who has created all of us together. Just going around the room, I'm seeing that we are all the pearls in the same thread. That's how I see it. That's how I was brought up as, and that's how my faith teaches me to welcome everybody. Just to give you an example, just like this, we have a National Cathedral here. We have a holy temple in India. It has 4 doors. And there is a reason to have the 4 entrances. That means to welcome people from each faith to a common Creator cause, to oneness. And if we can recognize that oneness in each other, there will be no anger, there will be no hatred. The key, I would say the key word to the Sikh faith are 2. One of the 5 words are 2. I'll say that in my language and then translate it. Nir-pao. That means no fear. Nir-vair. That means without hatred. If we can bring those qualities within us, those 2 qualities of the Creator created all of us to have these 2. If we recognize those 2, we can conquer the fear. The thing is, we should have faith in ourselves. Now I will come to the story, how I was welcomed as a stranger. I'll give you two quick stories that has led quite an impression on me. In 1990, I was in India, and there were some kind of riots going on. I happened to be from the north part of India, and I went to a conference in South India. That was a total cultural shock for me, because two parts of India, the only way I can communicate was through the language English. On my way back, I had to board the train, but because of the riots, there was no place left, literally no place left for me to get on board. One guy, I don't know how, he just took the hand, gave me the hand, he asked me the question, do you want to board the train? And I nodded, I said yes. Till today, I have not figured out how he pulled me in. He was a total stranger. I don't know who he was till today. He pulled me up with my baggage. I was in the compartment. I don't know where I landed, on whom I landed. I have no idea. So that is how I was welcomed by a stranger. That's the impression which I still carry with me, and I thank that person. I don't know whether the Creator came in that shape and form to take care of me. I'm just thankful to that moment when I think how I was welcomed by a stranger. That's one story. Second story, over here I'm involved in an interfaith women's group in Montgomery County, and I happen to visit more than one places of worship. Every time I go to a place of worship, I do not see anything different. It's just the pure love. The love, the compassion. That's how I am welcomed. And how did I welcome the strangers? I did the reverse. I invited the group, my women's interfaith group, to my Gurdwara, to my place of worship. Some of them, it was very first time visiting a Gurdwara. How did it go? It went actually very well. We sat together, we discussed what are our differences, where do we have a common ground, and all it lies down is it's love. If you have love, you can achieve what you want to achieve in your life. That's how I have welcomed the strangers. One time I will tell how it was different. In Sikh faith, we have a community food which we prepare from scratch, and anybody and everybody is welcome to enjoy that meal. First time when I went to a temple, other than my Sikh temple, it was a Hindu temple right here in Maryland. The difference I'm saying, nothing wrong with it. I had to pay for the food. And I was totally surprised because I was not raised that way, because once you go in the place of worship, food is supposed to be free. Water is supposed to be free. But that is one difference which I have the experience of. So that's how my interaction of faith, interaction of being a stranger, welcoming the stranger, and how did I feel it. Then I learned the culture over the period of time. Well, that's fine, okay, we just go there. But now I have seen there is a cultural change in that also in last 22 years. Now when I go to the Hindu temples, it's not happening that way. I am being served, given the food free now. So there is a change. So that is my story, how I welcomed the strangers and how I was a stranger and what was my common things and how did I find it different from others.
Okay, that's a wonderful story. Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to throw a story in if I could. On the board of Interfaith Voices, we have people of various faith traditions, and there's a couple Muslims on the board, and one of them has done quite well, and he usually has a rather large gathering at his house every year, and it's a fundraiser for the show. And I went last October to this fundraiser. This was now before the election, and most of the people there were Muslim. And when I say most, I mean 70 or 80. I mean, his house is rather large and holds a lot of people. And many people shared with me how very agitated they were about the anti-Muslim feeling that they had felt growing in the United States. And so I had to give a talk that night. And I think I said to you that I'm Catholic myself. And I began to think back. I don't remember this. I don't remember the 19th century. I'm not that old. But I know the history of the 19th century. And if you went back that far, I think Catholics would have felt the same way. They were not welcomed. And, you know, there were signs up saying no Irish need apply for jobs. That was intended for Irish largely being Catholic. And so I was comparing our experience with that of Muslims today, and yet assuring them that change can happen, you know, even to the point where we had at least one Catholic who was president of the United States, and that things can change. And they found that heartening, but the thing that really struck me was that the greatness of this country rests in its diversity. Its diversity of ethnic groups, its diversity of religions. Just look around this room, you know, probably not as racially diverse or perhaps ethnically diverse as some groups might be, but yet the diversity that is here is the bedrock of what this country is. And so many groups have gone through this kind of prejudicial treatment, but the more we get over it and learn to welcome one another and treat one another as individuals and see the goodness in one another, I think the better we are as Sikhs, the better we are as Hindus, the better we are as Christians or Jews or whatever we are, or Muslims, the better we are as Americans.
No question.
So. Any last word from each? We've got about 2 minutes, I'm told.
There is one thing that I want to make sure don't leave the impression it was all negative, you know, in terms of it, because even though I just wanted to bring it up, because if you are getting refugees, there are many problems and issues, but over the last 10 years, many of those Bhutanese refugees have done well. So they were able to, you know, come and learn skills and then able to manage, but not all. And that's why I just wanted to make sure, you know, there is some good thing about what has happened, that we were able to welcome and integrate them into the society as well.
I would say, Nanak Naam Chaddi Kala Tere Pane Sarbata Pala. This is the prayer which every Sikh ends at every event, I would say. Like this event, to me, it's ending today. I pray for all of you to be in the uplifted spirit always, and maybe you all be guided in the right direction for love and peace. Thank you.
I couldn't have ended it better. That's beautiful. So thank you both, and thank you to everybody who was good enough to listen.
I'd like to welcome you here not simply on this evening, but on every evening and at any time, that this place is indeed a house of prayer for all people. And we hope that our gathering on this evening, that we all have in some way been challenged to begin to grow even further into what it means for us to welcome the stranger that is in our midst, even as we find ourselves oftentimes being the stranger in another people's midst. And so we thank you for all being here tonight. This is only the beginning of our time and dialogues together. And so I will turn it over to Rabbi Sharat, who will tell us where we go from here. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
I'm going to tell this wonderful group where we're going to go from here. I think perhaps you could tell me, but I do have some ideas. I'm going to give you some ideas. I want to first say how wonderful it is to be hosted, the hospitality to all of us. None of us feels like strangers in this beautiful, beautiful accommodating space. Thank you, Dean Hollerith. Thank you, all the members of this community. Just like our neighbors at the Sikh Gurdwara here, when you came in, nobody asked you to pay for the food, right? It was just provided. That we learned from our Sikh sisters and brothers, not quite a Gurdwara hospitality, not a langar, but a wonderful accommodation. We deeply appreciate it. You've met some of the leaders of the Interfaith Conference. I have the good fortune of being the executive director of the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington. We're one of the partners that helped put this together. But aside from giving you some ideas, direct ideas of what you can do to carry on the spirit tonight, my boss is Michelle Dibley of the here of the Cathedral, and Simi Ram Reimer, who are probably the two people most responsible for the program, told me to tell you that we'll conclude with song, but we'll also, before that, have 3 or 4 minutes to fill out a 3x5 response card that you received when you came in. If you need one, I'm sure, if you need one, you can raise your hand and they'll be distributed. We would love your feedback on the program, your ideas, any feedback, what you would like to see in future programs of this kind. It would help us to know how you found out about it as well. So we will take 3 or 4 minutes to do that. Now, if you look in your programs, you will see some concrete opportunities that await you, and there are others. I'm sure there are others in this room, some of whom have put materials on the tables in the back. Please, as you leave, do look for materials you can pick up from the Interfaith Conference and from other organizations. But folded into your programs, there are a couple of things that I just wanted to bring to your attention. First, from the Interfaith Conference side of that page, we do interfaith dinner dialogues every year. These are more intimate settings than this, although we've created a certain intimacy even in this large space. It's very pleasing. But we do them in people's homes. We try to put together as diverse a group as we can, even with 6, 8, 10 people. We train facilitators. We encourage hosts. You can sign up through the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington to host, to facilitate, or join in a dialogue in your neighborhood. We do this throughout the community, Virginia, D.C., Maryland, to the extent that we're able to do that. And you'll find information about the dinner dialogues at the table, or you can look on any of this material. You can look on IFCMW, Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington.org. So dinner dialogues this year are scheduled in May, 2 Sunday nights in May. We also are involved in a project that I think of as not just the words that are have been exchanged today and the stories that are told, but how we continue to be involved in the lives of our neighbors, particularly those who need us at this point in time. We are creating what we call YROC, which stands for Washington Interfaith Response and Outreach Coalition. For those of our neighbors, vulnerable neighbors, who are in difficulty because of the climate that was created during the election or post-election, who are not feeling that they're able to worship freely, whose houses of worship may have been invaded, whose children don't feel comfortable wearing their religious garb. Any of those things that happen in our community, we know, you know, the people who came tonight know that there are neighbors who want to stand in solidarity with those folks. So we are organizing a coalition of solidarity congregations and solidarity neighbors who will walk across the street or walk to the other side of their community and stand in solidarity. As Imam Talib spoke about what happened in his neighborhood at Masjid Muhammad, there are hundreds, thousands of folks, including the folks in this room, who will want to do this once we're able to reach out to them. So we encourage you to, again, go to the website, look on the materials for YROC. If you think your congregation would like to be a solidarity congregation, it's a very simple process described on the website. And we encourage that. We encourage individuals who want to be able to reach out on a personal level. There's many things that we have to do in the way of advocacy and public policy. This is neighbor to neighbor solidarity. So that's the outreach of that. That's the response part. The outreach is organizing public demonstrations of solidarity. The clearest example of that is something that we do annually in this very neighborhood, marching between Washington Hebrew Congregation, which is close by, to the Islamic Center, visiting Buddhist, Hindu, the Sikh Gurdwara, several flavors of Christian denominations who are in this community, including passing by the cathedral. That's the annual Unity Walk. This year it will be September 10th. There's materials about that. We hope to do this in other communities, maybe simultaneously, in all parts of this community. So 3 or 4 congregations may walk between one building and the next building to demonstrate that this is a community where hate and bigotry has no home. So we're looking to do this on an ongoing basis, not simply sadly respond, if we have to actions of bigotry or bullying in our neighborhood. That will be September 10th. There's many more opportunities for cultural exchange, religious dialogue that's part of the YROC framework, which does include the 2 proximate counties in Maryland and all the proximate counties in Virginia, as well as the District of Columbia. We have partners in Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince Williams County, and if I'm leaving one out, I think I've hit the Virginia counties that are a part of the YROC network. So I think those are the Interfaith Conference events. It's been alluded to already tonight in various ways. There are many congregations in this community. In fact, they were on the steps of Foundry United Methodist today, publicly saying that they are going to be sanctuary congregations. You can be a solidarity congregation and a sanctuary congregation. That's a much stronger step. Those are congregations who are networked, providing support and solidarity to community members who fear being detained, deported, or profiled. A series of meetings have taken place at All Souls. The next meeting is Wednesday, April 26, 6 to 9. That material is there. I assume that's also at All Souls. Does anybody know? Simi, is that the same? Yes. Okay, so there's a movement of sanctuary and a movement of solidarity. They're complementary and they're not the same. We encourage those who feel moved religiously to do both, if that is your calling.